The symbolism of Uranus. Astrological interpretations associate Uranus with the principles of ingenuity, new or unconventional ideas, with individuality, discoveries, inventions, and revolutions. Ultimately, however, Uranus, among all planets, most governs genius. It is the planet of unexpected changes and originality. In society, it rules radical ideas and people, as well as revolutionary events that upset established structures. In art and literature, for example, the discovery of the planet Uranus coincided with the Romantic movement, which emphasized individuality and freedom of creative expression. Uranus may govern any group based on humanitarian or progressive ideals. Greek mythology. In classical Greek mythology, Uranus is the personification of the sky, blue sky thinking. According to the Theogony of Hesiod, the Titans were the 12 children of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, earth. There were 6 male Titans: Oceanus, Coeus, Crius, Hyperion, Iapetus, and Cronus, and 6 female Titans called the Titanides: Thea, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, and Tethys. As such, Uranus was the father of Cronus, the grandfather of Zeus, and the great-grandfather of Ares, Mars. The planet Uranus. Perhaps of any planet, Uranus best shows that the archetype, with its emphasis on genius and invention, existed independently from the planet that was named after this god. Uranus is the 7th planet from the Sun, but it was discovered to be a planet only in 1781 by Sir William Herschel. It is visible to the naked eye, but it was not recognized as a planet by ancient observers because of its dimness and slow orbit. Although discovered in 1781, it didn't get its final name until 1850. Uranus was chosen as an appropriate name as he was the father of the first generation of the Titans. As Saturn was the father of Jupiter, as Zeus, Uranus was the father of Saturn. So the archetype existed before the planet. Its glyph was suggested by Lalande in 1784. In a letter to Herschel, Lalande described it as un globe surmonté par la première lettre de votre nom, a globe surmounted by the first letter of your surname. We could take this as it stands. Joseph Jerome Lefrançois de Lalande, 11th of July 1732 to the 4th of April 1807, was a French astronomer and writer. His publications in connection with the transit of Venus of 1769 won him great fame, but he was an astronomer rather than an astrologer. But he was also a Freemason, and in 1766 Lalande with Helvetius founded the Les Sciences Lodge in Paris and received its recognition from Grand Orient de France in 1772. In 1776 he changed its name to Le Neuf Sceau and arranged for Benjamin Franklin to be chosen as the first worshipful master. And if we look at an astrological explanation, they say Uranus's glyph or symbol reveals the cross of matter over the circle of spirit, and the two semicircles on the sides represent receptivity. Note that the glyph of Uranus includes an inverted Venus. So there is more to this than meets the eye. Science and materialism appear to be dominant, and it appears that love takes a back seat whilst the revolution is underway. But spirit is still there, quietly hidden, and still getting inspiration through a veneer of science via Venus. Astronomically, Uranus takes 84 years to orbit the Sun, spending about 7 years in each sign of the zodiac. It is also very unusual among the planets in that it rotates on its side, so that it presents each of its poles to the Sun in turn during its orbit. Over the course of the orbit, this causes both hemispheres to alternate between being bathed in light and lying in total darkness. Planets are really archetypes. Astrology principally concerns itself with patterns, archetypes. See the video on archetypes, not lumps of rock and gas. Nevertheless, Uranus spends approximately 7 years in the same zodiac sign and is thus considered a generational influence, because it often takes 7 years for an idea to take hold, be understood, and overcome opposition, and for the basic errors in the design to become apparent and removed. In essence, wherever the Uranus archetype lands is affected most by it. Sometimes it is electricity, sometimes medicine, sometimes transport. If it lands in a constellation that is associated with travel, transport, exploration, and adventure, a burst of extraordinary inventions may occur in this area, led by some fundamental discovery. In other words, one or more men may be given the insight needed to get going on the discovery. And once the basics have been worked out, great numbers of men may continue developing the idea in all sorts of directions, place it in a more homely constellation where children, parenthood and babies abound, and completely different sorts of inventions may occur. For example, Patrick Hudson. In the 1948-1955 Uranus in Cancer period, more babies were born in those 7 years than in the previous 30, leading to the term baby boomers. In that same period, the first experiments with birth control pills took place, and the structure of DNA was first discovered. One Uranus cycle since DNA itself was first discovered. In the 1865 1872, Uranus in Cancer period. Note that a pattern of activity, the unrolling of that invention, may play out over some time after the initial invention, but where it plays out and what it will bring about depends on the people who take up the idea. The pattern may have good or bad results for each person or group of people, but the pattern for change has been established, both the type of change and the area in which change will take place. Patrick Watson. The archetypes were always there, always exerting an influence, and indeed the planets have no direct influence in themselves, but are simply mirrors of basic organizing principles in the universe. And this is key. An astrologer does not examine the patterns in the sky because he or she believes these lumps of rock and gas have any influence of themselves, but because they believe whatever the basic patterns of the universe are, the systems and influences, focal points and change points, they play out at every level, and big changes at the planetary level play out in the smaller changes that take place on Earth. As above, so below. In other words, they would exist whether the solar system existed or not. But an astrologer believes they do, that everything simply follows the same underlying systems and thus provides a clue as to what might be happening. No doubt all the rules, programs and coding for these systems is programmed at the quantum level, and we will never know what they are. But just as the sound of the first curlew calling tells us spring is on its way, when Uranus heads off into Aries, a change of direction is due and the focus of major change goes elsewhere. Even though the changes initiated may continue for years and years, as we can see they did with the invention of the internal combustion engine, so, although Uranus stays in a constellation for 7 years, the changes it occasions in that area of interest can rumble on for decades, if not hundreds of years. The internal combustion engine has evolved now for well over 100 years, but Uranus has moved on to the internet and communications, and man has been left to use the discovery provided and work with the idea to see what they can come up with. Utopia is possible, but whether we ever get there in these staged increments of change is very much up to us. And our video on Winston Churchill's prophecy may make sobering watching as we think about this.